Daniel Gillman here with College.town at the 2026 NCAA convention in DC. We've got a good one here, a couple standouts moving into the next phase of this collegiate sports world, joined by Cary Groth, the founder and president of the PICTOR Group, and Kelleigh Irwin Fagan, the partner at CCHA Law. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Cary, I want to start with you. You started the PICTOR Group, an intercollegiate athletics consulting program, about 12 years ago now. Walk us through the origins of that. You were the athletics director at both NIU and then Nevada, and how did it start to create this group?
Well, when you're in this business, you can't get it out of your system. And so I felt that there was a need for people with experience to provide some consulting services to the business. We needed it at Nevada. We used that service, and I think having that outside look, that outside objective viewpoint was very healthy for our programs. And I had worked with Todd Turner on and off a few times doing some consulting and felt it was time to put together something, different, unique. And we're 8 women, former athletic directors and a conference commissioner with many years of experience. And as a team, I think we provide the resources and the objectivity to help institutions as they face the many challenges that we're dealing with in intercollegiate athletics.
Give us a bit of a sales pitch, a brochure. What do you guys bring as a consulting group for those that may not be familiar with what a consulting team can bring to student athletes?
Well, it's not cookie cutter. It's based on what the client's needs are, and everyone's different. I don't think we've written a report that's looked the same for anybody because everybody's facing different challenges. And so we provide that type of opportunity. And if I don't have that kind of experience, then someone else in our firm can help them. And I think it's the diversity of the experiences and the types of institutions or conferences we've represented that can provide the client with those type of experiences and assistance.
So Kelleigh, an experienced law attorney working with CCHA, you specialize in NIL and Title IX and all of these very important features. When did you first come in contact with Cary and how did that come about?
Yeah, so about the time she was starting the PICTOR Group, we were starting the collegiate sports practice at CCHA, and I didn't know her at the time, but one of our co-founders is Julie Rolash, who's former Horizon League commissioner, just stepped down from that role. Julie knew Cary. We were working with a client and they had an issue and she said they need to hire PICTOR Group to help. And so it was still a few years from that point that I actually connected with Cary and her team. And we just realized that we had very much the same values in college athletics and how we approach our work with clients, how we partner with them, what we care about in this industry, and that we provided complementary services versus we weren't competing in any way, and their wealth of knowledge and our wealth of knowledge. We just thought we should figure out what this could look like for us to work together. And so we announced it about a year ago, and then we've spent kind of the past 6 months, year, figuring out what that means and what it looks like. We took a kind of a leap of faith and said, we know we're right for each other. We don't know exactly what that looks like. And so now we're trying to deliver some services and allow clients to benefit from that and us to benefit from those relationships.
Cary, what makes this partnership so unique between a law firm and a consulting group?
One-stop shop. It offers the clients that type of expertise. Nearly in all of our jobs with our clients, there's a legal aspect to it. And we found ourselves, especially most recently, I was working with a client, CCHA, was working with them as well. And so we were able to bounce some things off of one another. And I think having that up front and also having the confidentiality aspect that a law firm can bring is very helpful to presidents, legal counsel, and the athletics department. So Kelleigh's right, it's the same values and the desire to help these institutions in a package, with a package.
All right, so let's get a little bit more micro now, and having spent nearly 2 decades as an athletic director in this world of college sports, and especially this week specifically with President Baker coming out and maybe specializing and specifying a couple of the details with eligibility and betting and NIL and all of that, what does your AD brain start to think when you're here at the convention, and how can you start to use that for the student athletes?
Well, it's so much. And so what does your infrastructure look like? Are you prepared to handle these type of issues? The old-fashioned way of having your organizational structure the way it was for years worked just fine. But today it's a different environment. And so knowing how to navigate and position yourself to deal with some of these issues or these challenges. And it's better to be prepared up front, to be proactive than to be reactive. And I think that's what we can bring the client, is just stepping back, crossing your arms differently. How do we do this? How do we approach some of these challenges? And so I think whenever you come to an NCAA convention, you're overwhelmed. But I think in this time frame, it's more than ever. There's so many. If you're in development, used to raise money, donors to help support your programs. Now you're paying athletes. You're doing all sorts of things. There's new rules and regulations. Are you set up to handle that and be successful?
Kelleigh, educate me from a lawyer's perspective, because when I chatted with President Baker, it was a lot about the lawsuits that the NCAA is winning against some of these student athletes that are trying to sue the NCAA. Is that the area that CCHA is going towards, defending student athletes with NIL? What area are we specializing in here?
Yeah, so our primary client is the institutions, and we work with them on sort of anything that an athletics department may face in legal issues, whether it's they've got an investigation they need handled, they're working on NIL contracts, they've got a multimedia rights agreement, kind of the gamut. We do work from time to time with student athletes directly, and sometimes with coaches or people in their individual capacity that are in the industry. So it's which I think is helpful for us when we're, if we're working with an athlete, then we sort of understand what the institution's thinking. And if we're working with an institution, we have that perspective of the athlete. So we try to make sure that whoever our client is seeing it, the issue from all angles. But there's just so many. I mean, eligibility is one of the most litigated issues right now, but that's a sliver of the legal issues that colleges and universities are facing campus-wide, and then even athletics. We've seen an increase in general counsel's offices hiring somebody just for the athletics department, because a typical general counsel's office isn't able, maybe they don't have that specialty, or just from a capacity standpoint. There's just so much more to do with NIL, with immigration issues, with Title IX. It's kind of all these buzzwords people are living that out every day. So we try to be a resource and a partner with them on any of those issues that they're dealing with.
What percentage of the law firm are former NCAA employees?
Yeah, so our practice group is part of a bigger law firm of about 60 attorneys, but in our practice group, we've got 12 people, and I think like 80% of us had been at the national office at some point, and in different departments. And we've been in enforcement, we've been in what used to be called academic and membership affairs, we've been in the eligibility center. We've also had people in conference offices on campus and general counsel. So again, we try to bring that perspective, and having those. I mean, I still live in Indianapolis, and having those relationships, maintaining those relationships, is important for our clients, because the better relationships with the folks at the national office that we have, the more effective we can usually be with our clients, and we have to maintain credibility with them and advocate for our clients at the same time, which is sometimes a delicate act, but for the most part, we can have a difficult case with the enforcement staff, and then we can go to lunch with them the next day, and where no one's taking it personally. It's just our jobs, and as long as we're treat each other with respect, then it's those relationships really benefit us.
Cary, what does that say to you when you are in talks a year and a half ago with a law firm, and then you kind of learn that, well, most of you guys are NCAA employees and most of us are athletic directors, and so what kind of like perfect storm does that create from a partnership perspective?
Well, it is the perfect storm for me, and I'm sure CCHA looked at the PICTOR Group just like we looked at them, but we also heard about them. We heard about their work and their performance with their clients. And they have a great reputation, and they do things the right way. And when you're a firm that prides yourself on doing things the right way and providing these assets to your clients, you want to partner with a firm or a company that does it the same way. So their reputation speaks for themselves.
And so I'll ask each of you this. For you, Cary, in your capacity, what's the biggest question for the institutional partner?
How do we do it? How do we maintain our status, whether it's Division I, Division II institutions are looking at, can we remain Division II? That transfer to Division I, is that the right move? Trying to help these institutions position themselves to where they want to be and maintain. And the sad reality is not everybody can afford to be Division I. And so putting them in a good position to be sustainable, I think, is probably the most important part.
And from a law perspective, what are the questions towards that institution?
Yeah, the question I ask every client when they come to us, no matter the issue is what's your goal, what's your objective? Because they're going to have different goals and objectives. They're going to have different appetites for risk. They're going to have different philosophies at the president level, at the board level, of what's important to them. And our goal is to give them options to try to achieve that objective in a way that mitigates risk as much as possible. But that's going to look completely different, depending on who we're talking to that day. So I think if leaders on campus can spend more of that time of what is our North Star, what is our objective, and then driving their decisions to that, whether it's a strategic planning decision or a legal issue, keeping that in mind is really important to making sure you're following through on what matters to that campus.
Well, you were both NCAA athletes, golf and tennis. So Baylor goes out in the middle of the basketball season and recruits an NBA draftee who didn't sign a contract, never played a game in the NBA, but he's a part of a big trade, the G League. What does that mean when you see something like that? If Baylor were to come to you and say, all right, let's sort this out, like what does the future of eligibility look like for that?
Yeah, if a client comes to us with that issue, like that's exciting to me to be like, how does this work? What are the bylaws that apply to that? And, are there appropriate exceptions that apply? And in this case, there were. And so I think, we don't have this issue if there isn't some real financial incentive in college athletics for people who have gone that route to come back and still want to have some eligibility. So while I think it's important that we maintain some of those things in college sports that makes it unique and it's not professionalized to the point that it's becoming, the only minor league that's out there, I think you have to balance that with thinking fresh and not saying no immediately to everything while remembering all the other thousands of student athletes that took the more traditional path. So it's complex, and I know there's been a lot of, on this particular issue, a lot of different views, but each view, as a lawyer, facts and circumstances matter a lot. And usually what's in the media is you don't get all the facts that was relevant to a decision. So looking at each of them individually, I think is important.
Cary, can you see other sports that this might pertain to in the near future now when it comes to this somewhat professional eligibility question?
Sure. Tennis, golf, both of those are great examples as well. But I think to add to what Kelleigh said, it also helps provide that student athlete a path back to get their degree. Come back to school. And so I think that's opened doors. In the past when those student athletes left early, didn't make it, haven't returned to their institution for their college degree, that's sad, So this gives them that opportunity, just with that specific case. But yeah, I think all sports, baseball, another great example. So I think baseball's going to see it probably next more than anybody.
I think the CCHA might start to see a little bit more eligibility questions. But aside from that topic and some of the other ones that have been hot button this week, what is the most unique challenge facing institutions from your perspective?
It's hard to pick one that's unique. I think I think especially at the Division I level, revenue is just so critical to be able to compete. And while that's not a legal issue, how you generate revenue, how you spend that revenue you generate creates legal issues. But I think that's where a lot of resources are going, is how do we increase our revenue, and hopefully a way that's not resulting in a huge cut of expenses, or not making the student athlete experience lesser. But it's just a big business, and you need a lot of money to compete right now. And to Cary's point, maybe that means you have to reevaluate, where you are as an institution and what's important to you. But I think that's not unique to any school, but every school has to figure out their unique formula as to how they're going to make that work.
And then for each of you, maybe, when it comes to the sports gambling side of things, with nearly 20 Division I schools having players that have been caught fixing games, what's a solution to move forward from a lawyer perspective?
Yeah, I think that's one of the scariest issues that we've worked in, and really the saddest from a lot of different angles. For the student athlete that made a bad decision or got caught up in something, for the institution that may have had a game, that's impacted, or multiple games. I think the NCAA does educate, the institutions do educate, but I think the education has to go to another level. And repeatedly throughout the year, not just a beginning of the year meeting with the student athletes. It has to be something that's really, I think about when I was in high school, we did the DARE program and to try to reduce drug usage, and it was just hammered in my head, and I think it has to get to that point. So, and giving student athletes the tools to, if they are approached on social media, how do they handle that? Who do they go to? And if they do get themselves in trouble, let's not just punish them, let's rehabilitate them and try to help them deal with something that's really significant. I know there's probably solutions on the regulatory side of reducing prop bets or eliminating those, and I know that's been a huge focus for the national office and President Baker. So hopefully that, combined with how do we equip these student athletes to handle this, is probably the best path forward, short of it going away, which is not likely.
Yeah, I got to sit down with Clinton Hunkabrow with the NCAA yesterday and go into the e-learning perspectives and the 20-minute, class sessions that students can take that. But from a former AD's perspective, what's another route that can help with the sports gambling issue?
Well, interestingly enough, I was sitting with a group of sports professionals and Coaches Association. And they were exploring the option of having some of the gambling companies sponsor their sport, and trying to determine if there's a way to get a percentage of the revenue that's gained from gambling back into these coaching or sports associations. And I couldn't believe my ears.
Slippery slope, yeah.
It's a slippery slope. And it's, you're just inviting them. And interesting also enough is tennis is one of the fastest growing sports in that area. And if you think about, or even golf, you're just out there on your own. You miss a serve. Someone's betting on that. And how do you determine whether that student athlete has done that? It's a slippery slope. I think you said it very well. So we have to be very, very careful on how we align ourselves with those agencies.
It was great to chat with you. I think we covered a wide array of topics, and really exciting to hear both perspectives and to learn more about the partnership. Thank you so much for joining me.
Yeah,
Thanks for having
thank you
us.
so much for having us.